Right? I think they have taken this from us, this absolute speech in this nature.
Should not be completely absolute, because Hitler could have been stopped if that type of speech had never been allowed.
And now only more and more censorship is happening.
But I do think that it should not be absolute because of the power of these words.
Because I think that many things can be solved by providing a platform, like this debate, for example. Hello everyone, my name is Martin Jan Javornik, and I come from Serbia. I'm in my final year of law studies and also a communication and public speaking coach. This time I'll be debating, should free speech be absolute, and be taking the position of yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Charles De Leon. I'll be on the other side of this debate. Should free speech be absolute? I'll be debating the no position. I am currently a high school and middle school policy coach, and I am a general practice attorney.
As the motion of this debate is, should free speech be absolute? I'll be arguing that yes, it should be absolute. First of all, I have to set the stage, as it is my role to open this debate, by saying that we definitely, on this side, we do not mean that absolute free speech is completely absolute, because that would just be foolish and this debate would not have any sense. What I mean is that no people or no person should be punished or maybe defamed by saying something or being of a certain ideology, color, or sexual orientation if it offends somebody else. The right to offend is a crucial right and not only a part of free speech absolute type of connection, okay? So we do not connect absolute free speech and absolute to free speech by saying that we cannot have or should not have a right to offend. So that's my first setting the stage argument, okay? The second setting the stage argument is that I believe that no person by saying something can do something, okay? The people who are defending the other side and the no position is going to argue that free speech then leads to some action, but this is already an action. This is not the subject of this debate. So I'll be arguing that free speech, as in people saying something, should not be punished, nor should be defamed in any way.
So I'll be taking the position of no on this debate. And the reason why I say it, there's this famous quote that maybe some people might recognize, but only Sith deal in absolutes. The definition of absolute is basically something that is total, something that is taken with no context in relation to anything at all. I am of the belief that as human beings, we are always in relation to one another, not just with other human beings, but also with the environment that we're in, with nature that we're in. Martin mentioned about how actual free speech is not absolute, and that no people should be punished for their ideology, and that the right to offend is crucial. That was their first point made. I'll push back on this because in debating that free speech should not be absolute, there is ideologies out here in the world that exist today that deal with the belief that some people are subhuman, and because of this, it tends to enact legislation that allows for atrocities to occur. After World War II, we saw the Nazi ideology be punished. But in today's world, in the 21st century, we see that anytime a resolution against Nazism is taken to the floor on the United Nations, consistently there are two countries that voted down: the United States and Israel. There's a reason for this. It is an ideology that has been allowed to survive. And then second, my opponent says that no person can do anything by saying something. I
Sorry to interrupt him, but I have to say something about that first statement about the Nazi ideology, especially that it is still active, is what you were saying in any shape or form. I think that not one ideology is completely shut down. What it actually means here is the Nazi ideology got its verdict. Okay, in the Nuremberg trials, we have completely defended our world and completely annihilated Nazism for taking power. Okay, if for all I know, I can have a friend who's Babylonian religious person, okay, and worshiping Moloch, okay, which is sacrificing children and so on. The person who believes is one thing if he only says something. Okay, what you are saying is completely what I abolished in my first statement, is that you are already taking action. Okay, they are voting, and therefore you're thinking they will take action on it and so on. I'm just merely speaking about free speech in public or private that should not be punished. Okay, so you can continue to your second one.
and thank you for that clarification. So just to kind of finish up on the second point that my opponent had made about no person by saying something can do something. This completely fails to take into account the power that our words actually hold. Here in the United States, the Constitution claims to protect free speech, and a lot of people think this is an absolute right in the United States. However, in constitutional law, you learn that free speech actually has a lot of restrictions, particularly against, they have a few sub areas, but one of them is fighting words. These are words that can be construed as inherently aggressive or something that can make somebody want to fight. So those are the type of words that are not protected free speech. And that's because it takes into account the power that words hold. Now, do I agree with the exact restrictions that the US Constitution has on free speech? Not exactly, but I do think that it should not be absolute because of the power of these words. Now, I want to touch on the clarification point made by my opponent, where he said that Nazi ideology has been shut down because they were held in the Nuremberg trials and they were held accountable, and Nazism as a ideology was completely defeated. I would like to take some historical examples and push back against the defeat of Nazism, because it very much survived and it's still very much alive in the 21st century. The reason I mention it and is because at the end of World War II, as it can be common knowledge for many, underground tunnels were built for Nazi scientists and Nazi officers to escape. These officials ended up taking positions of power all across Europe, all across the United States. Some moved to South America, and they were able to continue feeding this ideology. So whether it's actually defeated, I think that can be pushed back upon. But my main reason, and it's the main point that I'm trying to make today, is that free speech should not be absolute, because it then runs into something that a philosopher named Karl Popper calls the paradox of tolerance. In a tolerant society allows for free speech to exist. Different ideologies, different politics, different ideas, great. However, if a tolerant society tolerates intolerance, such as Nazi ideology or other type of ideologies that consider other types of human beings subhuman, etc., we run into a society where intolerance then takes advantage of the tolerant society and is able to crush it through.
In here, just because I wanted to finish my thought on by saying that we completely defeated the Nazi ideology. What I meant to say is, especially by me comparing that to the Moloch religious person from Babylon and so on, we defeated it in terms of real legal power. Okay, underground tunnels can be an argument that I can also hold if you start to censor something by the image of a hate speech, which we can definitely go to. But that's what I'm saying. The real power was in the legal system that imposed it. Okay, the person was born and was born into that system. Okay, he had no choice but to believe in it first of all, and then only apply logic maybe if they were mature enough. What I'm saying is that we have a certain podium and a certain challenge for all these ideologies, and they should be freely spoken out so that we as rational beings can accept it or not. Okay, so Copernicus offended the Christian there, Catholic Church, okay, that believed that the earth was indeed in the center of the universe. And Copernicus said, no, it was the sun. And he definitely offended them. Okay, they thought that that's a bad ideology. That's different, but bad, very much so threatening to the church at that time. And therefore, they have said this is literally hate speech or speech that should have been censored. Okay, what I'm saying is that in Nazi Germany, that same thing happened, but they didn't have the setting to challenge these ideas. So Adolf Hitler was holding speeches in the pubs underground, but people knew, okay, people knew that he was doing this and it was not really good, but they were silent. They were silent for they didn't have the setting we have today. We have evolved finally to the final stage where we can completely say that free speech can be absolute. We haven't got to the argument of the social media yet, which of course is my next, but I just wanted to finish that these ideologies that were bad were completely cut out in terms of a legal system and a country having the power over it. But for example, even in America or all around the world, we see the rise of neo-Nazism. But it is only because people are censoring and making the martyrs of these leaders. Okay, they are completely censoring them. They're making the underground tunnels of this time, which are social media posts that get shadow banned and so on. And therefore, just because the free speech is not absolute, I don't think we have the setting to challenge these ideas. Okay, and I wanted to go back to your definition that absolute free speech practically does not exist, which I agreed as soon as I started talking. And yes, I know there are some restrictions, but the thing is that we live in a time that these restrictions are just more and more rising and growing. What I fear, and what I fear for free speech, is that it is going to become a limited speech. And a limited speech can still be free in certain areas. And that's why we have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, and in that arena, I do find myself agreeing with you. Like I stated earlier, I don't agree with all the restrictions that have taken place in today's legal system. I can't really speak much to the European Union or really anywhere else that's not the United States. But here in the United States, the type of restrictions that they have on freedom of speech are some that I don't necessarily agree with. For example, they don't have restrictions against Nazi speech. They allow Nazi ideology to flourish here in the United States. I'm sure you can find it in media, but a lot of it is protected by police officers coming out, allowing Nazis to march on our streets, allowing them to have rallies and stuff. Again, I can't really speak to the European Union, the UK, or anywhere else that's not the United States. So I do apologize for that. But there's also some new restrictions that they're trying to pass here. That they're saying that some things can be considered anti-Semitic if you take a stance against the genocide of Palestinians. So in those terms of restrictions, I do agree with you that some of these restrictions and censorships are actually kind of bad for us. But in where I feel that restrictions do take place or should take place, not that they're necessarily taking place, is here in the U.S., specifically in the legal world, in restricting Nazi ideology. You said that we defeated Nazism in the legal world since the real power was in the legal system. I have to push back against this because the first head of the United Nations was a Nazi official that worked under the Hitler administration. The first head of NASA in the United States was also a Nazi official that was part of the Hitler administration. The first head of NATO was also a Nazi officer that worked under the Hitler administration. So in the legal system, I can't say that it was necessarily defeated. If anything, it went underground. I think, don't get me wrong, should we have the right to offend people? If somebody's being disrespectful, sure, yeah. But I think it's whenever those words have legal power and can create legislation and allow for Nazis to march on the streets where we have to push back against it, because it allows these Nazis to flourish, to join FBI, local police departments, and it allows them spaces where they can extend their ideology. um,
And hop on that. So the thing is, yes, you have described every single position that was indeed in certain connection to the Nazi party, then especially the UN and the NATO and so on. But again, let me just circle back. What I really meant is that it was defeated on a majority slash legal slash republic level of, let's say, Germany and Nazi Germany thereafter. But these people, as a lone person, have no real influence because you're still in these bodies, you still vote. Okay? So, for all I know, yes, he can be the descendant, or maybe like afterward, okay, war was ended, Germany was ended, and then the Chairman was there. These people still vote against this person. So he cannot really impose something just because he's the part of that. But then again, I don't really want to go in that field because I purposely mentioned Hitler in the pubs because it started because people were fearing to say something that they think. Okay, so yes, we can now see what the consequences of those actions were, but I don't think that we should draw the conclusion from the consequences. We should draw the conclusion from the source. And the source was that no one stopped him, and that's why he flourished. And then if you have the majority of speech in those, of course, settings, without the internet, without the logical proofing and everything, without people being that many educated people, okay, with that much educated society, you couldn't really stop it when it was already snowballing. Okay, so that's what I really meant there. But what I really wanted to say is that the rallies, how do we even shut them down? Like, I have seen the movie Imperium, for example, which is made by the true story, and there you have the Nazi rally. The David Radcliffe, I think, Harry Potter actor, is in it, and there is like Antifa portrayed as some people who are going to fight the Nazis, okay, by using physical force. And this only strengthened the movement. Okay, in that storyline in the film, the main character is helping the other Nazi leader recover, and therefore they strengthen their bond. Right? And this is what I'm saying. All these actions that are now trying to be imposed by everyone who is against it are all in violence nature. Okay, they're of violent nature. And I think that by providing a setting where everybody can say whatever they want for whatever offensive thing it maybe implies or causes, it's still an opinion that has been heard. Right? So that's why I was so much advocating for speech alone, because I think that many things can be solved by providing a platform like this debate, for example, or any type of setting like Agora Forum in ancient Greece, where people could say what they mean. Right? I think they have taken this from us, this absolute speech in this nature, and now only more and more censorship is happening, and only we know what's going to be the new chairman of UN/NATO/ some other organization that's maybe going to take toll just because we weren't speaking out as good people in Nazi Germany against the Nazis, for example.
No, so earlier you said that because of the head of NATO or the head of the United Nations or the head of NASA, only because they could say anything doesn't mean that they could impose anything. I do want to remind you that these were the heads, these were the executives of these organizations. They can impose policies, rules, These policies, we live under them. They create the environment that we live in. You say the conclusions need to come from the source, not from the consequences. The reason why Hitler was able to rise is because no one stopped him in the beginning. That's why I'm saying that freedom of speech should not be completely absolute, because Hitler could have been stopped if that type of speech had never been allowed. A type of speech that is violent, a type of speech that says Jewish people need to be exterminated, a type of speech that says that our economic woes are because of gypsies and stuff. That type of speech and that violent speech should have never been allowed.
It's allowed, you can stop it. If you don't allow it, it will go underground, where your takes and your actions against it, your actions of in favor of stopping it, will just lessen. And therefore, I think that definitely the core of it all is that free absolute speech should exist.
I think with it going underground is okay, because once it's underground, it can be stamped out by legal mechanisms, especially the type of Nazi ideology that I speak on. And sometimes, yeah, maybe some fighting needs to get involved. We fought a world war.